The Cherokee are an indigenous people of North America, belonging to the Iroquois lineage. The origin of the name Cherokee remains uncertain, with theories suggesting it may have come from the Choctaw tribe, one of the Iroquois five-nation tribes, or possibly a Creek word meaning people of different speech. The Cherokee referred to themselves as Onionwe, meaning principal people. They speak an Iroquois language and possess a writing system for their language, created in the 19th century by the renowned Cherokee leader, Sequoyah. And ancestors, anthropologists, and historians propose two primary theories regarding Cherokee origins. One suggests they are latecomers to southern Appalachia, possibly migrating from northern areas around the Great Lakes in late prehistoric times. This region was historically the territory of Iroquois-speaking peoples, including the Iroquois nations. Another theory posits that the Cherokee originated from present-day Texas or northern Mexico, migrating to the Great Lakes before eventually settling in the mountains and valleys of the southern Appalachian chain. Ethnographer James Mooney, who lived with the Cherokee in the late 19th century, documented oral traditions from elders, recounting an ancient migration from the Great Lakes region to the south. By 1500 BC, the Cherokee language had become distinct, and by the year 1000, the Cherokee had established a woodland lifestyle, integrating unique cultural elements influenced by Mississippian traditions. The Cherokee economy, like other Southeast tribes, was predominantly agricultural. They cultivated crops such as corn, beans, squash, sunflowers, and tobacco. Hunting also played a vital role, with deer, bear, and elk hunted using bows and arrows, while smaller animals like raccoons, rabbits, squirrels, and turkeys were caught using long blowguns that shot wooden and feather darts. Fishing methods included hooks and lines, spears, and traps. Additionally, wild plant foods, including roots, greens, berries, and nuts, supplemented their diet. Clothing varied by season, but typically consisted of woven cloth or deerskin. Women wore dresses, men wore pants, and all wore shoes. During winter, cloaks made from woven cloth or fur provided warmth. Hairstyles were diverse across clans. Some men were clean-shaven, others grew beards, and some styled their hair in top knots, ponytails, or shaved sections. At the time of European contact, the Cherokee were a settled agricultural society living in approximately 200 sizable villages and towns. A typical Cherokee town had 30 to 60 houses and a large council house where community meetings were held and a sacred fire burned. There, homes were initially wattle and daub structures, circular frames interwoven with branches, plastered with mud, and partially sunken into the ground. Later, they transitioned to bark-roofed log cabins with no windows, a single door, and a smoke hole in the roof. One of their significant religious ceremonies was the Busk or Green Corn Festival, a celebration of the first fruits and the renewal of the sacred fire. The Cherokee are a matrilineal society, meaning lineage and inheritance are traced through the mother's side. In the past, they were organized into 7 matrilineal clans, residing in permanent villages often located along rivers and streams. Women held significant roles within Cherokee society, serving as the heads of households, owning homes and land, farming the family's land, and acting as the mothers of the clans. As in many Native American cultures, Cherokee women were revered as life givers, honored for their roles in childbirth and agriculture, and often took on leadership positions within their communities. The ancient Cherokee experienced alternating periods of war and peace, which led to a dual system of tribal governance. This system included a white, or peace, organization and a red, or war organization. Each town was led by 2 chiefs, a white chief during peacetime and a red chief during times of war. Women also played an integral role in governance, with prominent women attending war councils as advisors to male leaders and overseeing the treatment of prisoners of war. Slavery existed in Cherokee society prior to European colonization. They often enslaved enemy captives taken during conflicts with other indigenous tribes. According to their oral traditions, slavery was viewed as a consequence of an individual's failure in war and considered a temporary status. Enslaved individuals could eventually gain release or be adopted into the tribe. During the colonial era, Cherokee people were both victims and participants in the slave trade. Carolinian settlers purchased Cherokees as slaves during the late 17th and early 18th centuries. At the same time, the Cherokee were among the Native American groups that sold enslaved Native people to traders, supplying labor for Virginia and other northern colonies. Over time, as they adopted certain European American customs, the Cherokee began to purchase enslaved African Americans to work on their farms or plantations. Even during their forced removal on the Trail of Tears, they brought enslaved individuals with them and continued the practice of slavery in Indian Territory. European contact. The Cherokee first encountered Europeans in 1540 when Hernando de Soto and his Spanish expedition came upon them along the Tennessee River. Although de Soto's visit was brief, his interactions with other indigenous groups were often hostile. Later, in 1566, the Juan Pardo expedition revisited the region, and the Spanish established a fort and small mining operations in the area, which persisted until 1690. However, the Cherokee's location in the interior mountains provided them with relative isolation until English settlers began expanding westward. By 1629, English traders had reached the Appalachian region and made contact with the Cherokee, whose population during the 17th century was estimated to be between 20,000 and 50,000. In 1673, English settlers arrived in Echota, the capital of the Cherokee Nation, to establish trade relations. This trade involved exchanging European goods like brass kettles, textiles, scissors, knives, firearms, and metal tools for Cherokee goods such as deerskins, beeswax, river cane baskets, and enslaved Native individuals. Significant changes took place within Cherokee society as a result of European contact and trade. Leadership shifted from the traditional role of the medicine man to warriors, who became hunters seeking profit through trade. Relations with neighboring tribes and European settlers were often strained. In 1673, the Cherokee raided Spanish settlements in Florida and engaged in conflicts with coastal tribes in the Carolinas. However, the introduction of European trade and competition further exacerbated these rivalries, destabilizing the region. By 1680, many tribes, including the Cherokee, had acquired their first firearms and fortified their larger villages. This period saw a constant conflict with the Catawba tribe to the east, along with increasing tensions with the Creek and Choctaw to the south. To the west, the Cherokee maintained a traditional hostility with the Chickasaw, who were also British allies. Meanwhile, to the north, the struggle for dominance in the fur trade between the French, Dutch, and English sparked the Beaver Wars, further intensifying regional instability. In 1730, the Cherokee formed an alliance with the English, pledging allegiance to King George II and agreeing to trade exclusively with the British. This alliance was significant, as other European powers, particularly the French, were also forging alliances with Native American tribes. The English sought to secure the Cherokee as allies against their French rivals. However, the Cherokee population was severely affected by a series of smallpox epidemics during the 18th century, reducing their numbers by half. These diseases, introduced by European contact, were devastating for Native American communities. By this time, Cherokee territory was firmly established in the Appalachian region of the southeastern United States. Their land spanned parts of present-day North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, Kentucky, Alabama, and Georgia. However, between 1721 and 1777, through negotiations in 10 treaties with Great Britain, the Cherokee ceded large portions of their land, significantly reducing their territorial holdings. From the early days of American independence, the U.S. government considered relations with Native American tribes a key national security issue. Two influential figures in shaping early Indian policy were Secretary of War Henry Knox and President George Washington. President Washington believed that civilizing or assimilating Native Americans into European American ways of life was the most effective means of ensuring lasting peace. This concept of civilization involved encouraging Native Americans to adopt farming, abandon hunting and their vast migratory lands, and settle in permanent villages, aligning more closely with European ideals of land use and lifestyle. The U.S. government believed Native Americans should adopt European customs, including clothing, family structures, and Christianity. Christian missionaries played a significant role in the assimilation process, teaching the Cherokee reading, writing, arithmetic, housekeeping, personal grooming, and table etiquette while discouraging what they considered heathen practices. Despite this, the Cherokee selectively embraced ideas they found beneficial and rejected those they deemed irrelevant. However, it became clear that American settlers, like their English predecessors, were relentless in their territorial expansion. This created deep divisions within the Cherokee leadership and the broader tribe regarding how to respond. Some advocated for negotiation and assimilation, while others resisted diplomacy at every opportunity. Amid this turmoil, Sequoyah, a Cherokee man, made a groundbreaking contribution to his people's cultural preservation in the early 18th century. Over 12 years, he developed a syllabary, a written system where each symbol represents a syllable of the Cherokee language. This innovation enabled the Cherokee to achieve widespread literacy in a short time and facilitated communication across tribes, regardless of location. By the early 1800s, continuous land loss forced many Cherokee to move westward to reserve territories. Meanwhile, those who remained east of the Mississippi River formed a centralized government by the end of the 18th century, moving away from the clan-based system of governance and adapting to the changing political landscape. Around 1817, approximately one-third of the Cherokee people relocated to Indian Territory west of the Mississippi River. They signed a treaty with the United States, exchanging their southeastern lands for territory in what is now Arkansas. In 1828, Sequoyah joined a delegation of West Cherokees traveling to Washington, D.C., where they signed a new treaty, trading their Arkansas land for territory in modern-day Oklahoma. These individuals, known as the Old Settlers, were the first members of the tribe to establish themselves in Indian Territory. The Cherokee made significant efforts to demonstrate their assimilation to U.S. society. They established a modern capital called New Echota, created their own constitution, and launched the first Native American newspaper. Despite these efforts, pressure to relocate westward continued to mount. The discovery of gold in Cherokee territory exacerbated these tensions. In May 1830, President Andrew Jackson persuaded Congress to pass the Indian Removal Act, mandating the relocation of all eastern Native American tribes to territories west of the Mississippi River. While 4 of the 5 civilized tribes, the Chickasaw, Choctaw, Creek, and Seminole, signed removal treaties in 1832, the Cherokee resisted. Under the leadership of Chief John Ross, they took their case to the U.S. Supreme Court in Cherokee Nation versus Georgia. With the assistance of several American lawyers, they argued for their rights, but their legal struggle did not prevent continued encroachment by settlers. By 1834, much of the Cherokee land in Georgia was illegally occupied and eventually auctioned off in a state-run land lottery, further displacing the Cherokee and intensifying their plight. Despite Chief John Ross's strong objections, a small faction of Cherokees, later called the Treaty Party, met to negotiate and formally accept the Treaty of New Echota. This controversial agreement sold the remaining Cherokee land in the east in exchange for territory in the west, $5 million, provisions for the journey, and 1 year of federal support for those relocating. The U.S. Senate ratified the treaty, and President Andrew Jackson signed it, setting a deadline of May 1838 for the Cherokee to leave their homeland. As a result, nearly 16,000 Cherokee, along with members of other tribes, were forcibly removed from their eastern homelands. While some Cherokees avoided relocation by hiding in the mountains, the majority were rounded up by federal troops. In June 1838, many were loaded onto flatboats at Ross's Landing, Georgia, and transported down the Tennessee River. The boats were dangerously overcrowded, nearly sinking under their weight. Others traveled by train or made the arduous journey on foot. The conditions were harsh, and more than 4,000 Cherokee perished during the journey, which came to be known as the Trail of Tears. After arriving in Oklahoma Territory, Chief Ross and his supporters from the National Party faced the challenge of unifying the Cherokee under a new government. The Eastern Cherokees favored a constitution modeled after the United States, while the Old Settlers preferred a system rooted in traditional Cherokee laws. The disagreement made it difficult to form a unified government. To resolve the issue, Sequoyah, representing the old settlers, and Jesse Bushyhead, an Eastern Cherokee Baptist minister, proposed a meeting in July 1839. They suggested letting the people decide the structure of their government, aiming to bridge the divisions and create a unified Cherokee nation in the West. Before the meeting to unify the Cherokee nation took place, members of the National Party sought revenge against those they held responsible for signing the Treaty of New Echota and the resulting Trail of Tears. They secretly compiled a list of individuals they believed deserved the ultimate punishment, death. Among those targeted, 3 men were killed almost simultaneously. Major Ridge was ambushed and killed while traveling in Washington County, Arkansas. Elias Boudinot was attacked by men pretending to need medicine, and John Ridge was dragged from his bed and stabbed to death. In July 1839, John Ross, the National Party, and representatives from the old settlers signed an act of union, bringing together the Eastern and Western Cherokee factions. By September, the Cherokee adopted a constitution modeled after their earlier one in the East, with John Ross elected as principal chief and an old settler chosen as second principal chief. The Cherokee Nation experienced years of internal conflict, sometimes erupting into violence, as the old settlers, the Treaty Party, and the National Party adjusted to life in the West. Sequoyah worked alongside John Ross to mediate peace between the factions. The conflict ended with the signing of a treaty on August 6, 1846, brokered by the United States government. The treaty guaranteed that all Cherokee Nation members could access the ceded lands and granted general amnesty for crimes committed during the civil strife. During the American Civil War, internal divisions emerged again, but ultimately, the Cherokee Nation sided with the Confederacy. In western North Carolina, Cherokees served as part of Thomas's Legion, a unit of approximately 1,100 Cherokee, and white soldiers known for their exemplary battle record, primarily in Virginia. This unit was the last Confederate force to surrender in North Carolina, laying down arms at Waynesville on May 9, 1865. After the war, a treaty with the United States freed enslaved black individuals held by Cherokee members in Indian Territory. Additionally, between the Cherokee Nation's removal in 1838 and the Civil War's end, many Cherokees entrusted their money to William Holland Thomas, their agent and later their only white chief, to purchase land on their behalf. Thomas acquired significant tracts of land, which became part of the modern-day Qualla Boundary, the official Cherokee Indian reservation in North Carolina. The Cherokees who avoided relocation during the Trail of Tears, including those who had hidden in the mountains, legally owned land through the Treaty of 1817, or returned after escaping, formed the foundation of what would become the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians. Under the General Allotment Act of 1887, which the Cherokee fiercely resisted, tribal lands were forcibly divided into individual plots. Surplus lands not allotted to Cherokee individuals were sold by the federal government. In 1891, the Cherokee's western lands, known as the Cherokee Strip or Cherokee Outlet, were sold to the United States and opened primarily to non-native settlers in 1893. When Oklahoma became a state in 1907, the Cherokee government was dissolved and its people were granted U.S. citizenship. However, the Oklahoma Cherokee lost their right to elect their own chiefs, as these leaders were appointed by U.S. presidents until 1970, when President Nixon signed a congressional act restoring their right to elect their government. During World War I, Cherokee soldiers from western North Carolina played a pivotal role as code talkers, delivering messages in their native language to evade German interception. This marked the first known use of Native Americans in the U.S. military to transmit secure communications under fire. Cherokee code talkers continued this critical role throughout the war. During World War II, the Cherokee were among 25,000 Native Americans who served, with many continuing the legacy of code talking alongside other Native tribes. During the Civil Rights Movement, the Cherokee actively advocated for Native and African American rights, culminating in the restoration of their right to self-governance. Today, 3 federally recognized Cherokee tribes exist: the United Keetoowah Band of Cherokee Indians and the Cherokee Nation, both in Oklahoma, and the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians in North Carolina. By the year 2000, approximately 281,000 people identified as Cherokee, with an additional 448,000 claiming partial Cherokee ancestry. The Cherokee language remains a living tradition, spoken by an estimated 12,000 to 22,000 people today, preserving the cultural heritage of one of the most significant Native American tribes.